1 Kings 7. Now Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. And he built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 to the 10th cubits, and its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, on 4 rows of cedar pillars with cedar beams on the pillars. And it was paneled with cedar above the side chambers, which were on 45 pillars, 15 in each row. And there were artistic window frames in 3 rows and window opposite window in 3 ranks. And all the doorways and doorposts had squared artistic frames, and window was opposite window in 3 ranks. Then he made the hall of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its width 30 cubits, and a porch was in front of them, and pillars and a threshold in front of them. And he made the hall of the throne where he was to judge, the hall of judgment, and it was paneled with cedar from floor to floor. And his house where he was to live, the other court inward from the hall, was of the same workmanship. He also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon had married. All these were of costly stones, of stone cut according to measure, sawed with saws inside and outside, even from the foundation to the coping, and so on the outside to the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even large stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. And above were costly stones, stone cut according to measure, and cedar. So the great court all around had 3 rows of cut stone and a row of cedar beams, even as the inner court of the house of the Lord and the porch of the house. Now King Solomon sent and brought Hiram from Tyre. He was a widow's son from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in bronze. And he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill for doing any work in bronze. So he came to King Solomon and performed all his work. And he fashioned the 2 pillars of bronze. 18 cubits was the height of one pillar, and a line of 12 cubits measured the circumference of both. He also made 2 capitals of molten bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. The height of one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. There were nets of network and twisted threads of chainwork for the capitals which were on the top of the pillars, 7 for the one capital and 7 for the other capital. So he made the pillars in 2 rows around on the one network to cover the capitals which were on the top of the pomegranates. And so he did for the other capital. And the capitals which were on top of the pillars in the porch were of lily design, 4 cubits. And there were capitals also on the 2 pillars, close to the rounded projection which was beside the network. And the pomegranates numbered 200 in rows around both capitals. Then he set up the pillars of the porch of the nave, and he set up the right pillar and named it Jachin, and he set up the left pillar and named it Boaz. And on top of the pillars was lily design. So the work of the pillars was finished. Now he made the sea of cast metal 10 cubits from brim to brim, circular in form, and its height was 5 cubits and 30 cubits in circumference. And under its brim gourds went around encircling it 10 to a cubit, completely surrounding the sea. The gourds were in 2 rows cast with the rest. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. And the sea was set on top of them, and all their rear parts turned inward. And it was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was made like the brim of a cup, as a lily blossom. It could hold 2,000 baths. Then he made the 10 stands of bronze. The length of each was 4 cubits, and its width 4 cubits, and its height 3 cubits. And this was the design of the stands. They had borders, even borders between the frames. And on the borders which were between the frames were lions, oxen, and cherubim. And on the frames there was a pedestal above. And beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. Now each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles, and its 4 feet had supports. Beneath the basin were cast supports with wreaths at each side. And its opening inside the crown at the top was a cubit, and its opening was round like the design of a pedestal, a cubit and a half, and also its opening there were engravings, and their borders were square, not round. And the 4 wheels were underneath the borders, and the axles of the wheels were on the stand. And the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half. And the workmanship of the wheels was like the workmanship of a chariot wheel. Their axles, their rims, their spokes, and their hubs were all cast. Now there were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each stand. Its supports were part of the stand itself. And on the top of the stand there was a circular form half a cubit high, and on the top of the stand its stays and its borders were part of it. And he engraved on the plates of the stays and on its borders cherubim, lions, and palm trees, according to the clear space on each, with wreaths all around. He made 10 stands like this. All of them had one casting, one measure, and one form. And he made 10 basins of bronze. One basin held 40 baths. Each basin was 4 cubits, and on each of the 10 stands was one basin. Then he set the stands, 5 on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea of cast metal on the right side of the house eastward toward the south. Now Hiram made the basins and the shovels and the bowls. So Hiram finished doing all the work which he performed for King Solomon in the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the capitals, which were on top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals, which were on top of the pillars, and the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks. 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals, which were on the tops of the pillars, and the 10 stands and the 10 basins on the stands, and the 1 sea and the 12 oxen under the sea, and the pails and the shovels and the bowls. Even all these utensils which Hiram made for King Solomon in the house of the Lord were of polished bronze. In the plain of the Jordan the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarethan. And Solomon left all the utensils unweighed because they were too many. The weight of bronze could not be ascertained. And Solomon made all the furniture which was in the house of the Lord, the golden altar and the golden table on which was the bread of the presence, and the lampstands, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary of pure gold, and the flowers and the lamps and the tongs of gold, and the cups and the snuffers and the bowls and the spoons and the fire pans of pure gold, and the hinges both for the doors and of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house, that is, of the nave, of gold. Thus all the work of King Solomon performed in the house of the Lord was finished. And Solomon brought in the things dedicated by his father David, the silver and the gold and the utensils, and he put them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord.